at the bottom, by the bottom, and for the bottom. So your objective of having innovation serving the poor, I think it's a matter of learning and supporting what's happening even by children, by untrained people, by farmers. It's quite remarkable. I think one of you said opening up our minds to what's possible, and it's quite remarkable. I think, with your permission, Sam, since the lunch is at 1, perhaps we can leave the questions for the gathering. Sure. And so we can promptly reconvene at 2 for the session that Sam Sharper will chair. And thank you very much. It was a very, at some level, moving, and at another level, inspiring and exciting set of presentations. Thank you very much.
Thank you for chairing.
So, TEKES is a governmental agency under the Ministry of Employment and the Economy with a mission growth and well-being from renewable. And what we do, we fund leading-edge research, development and innovation projects. And we aim to build a strong networked knowledge base, renew the economy and create new businesses, increase productivity in industries and service sector, and enhance well-being in society and improve environmental sustainability. This is all I tell about TEKES in general. I have a lot of material. I won't go it through, but if somebody is interested in details or backgrounds, why we do something, so I think that you will be delivered this material. Why TEKES exists? I think that these basic ideas we had when TEKES was established still are relevant. But still we have made a lot of major changes in our activities. Concerning first knowledge base, we know that competitive funding for research increases the excellence, but in the case of TEKES, also relevance of research for our economy and society. And we are looking relevance established, especially by building cooperation between academia and enterprises. And I just pick up 3 points which I think are very important. First, the same organization has the responsibility to fund research in universities and research institutes, as well as research development and innovation in companies. Secondly, we are using funding criteria to boost cooperation. And thirdly, we run and execute cooperative programs between companies and universities. And here you just can see an example of benchmarking how this cooperation is working, or how common it is in Finland. So I think that this has been working quite okay. We also try to increase the business R&D and have spillover effects. Governmental competitive funding for businesses or business R&D increases this twice the amount of funding. We have several times measured this, that it's really true. But we also know that spillover effects are even bigger than direct effects in the funded company. There are also market failures, especially concerning financing markets in seed and startup phase of companies, and it requires governmental intervention by higher risks than private financiers take. And then last thing is focus. A small country has to make strategic choices, and our focus areas of research investments are defined together with companies and research organizations. But which is very important that after this partly top-down process, the process is turned totally to bottom-up process, so that all the ideas, plans, and ideas they come from our customers, companies, universities, research institutes. But then the major changes, they have been based on evidence from benchmarking, evaluation, studies, follow-up analysis and synthesis, foresight and governmental policy and so on. And I can see some challenges which are common for all of us, some may be special for Finland. Lack of innovation in services. We have increased our funding for services. At the last year we funded both sector at the same volume, I mean manufacturing and services. Lack of growth companies. We have doubled our investments in young companies during the last 5 years. We have a new funding instrument for young innovative enterprises. It was benchmarked from the US. It's very much like SBIR in the US. We established new startup accelerators. This was benchmarked from Israel very much. And the strategy is to balance the current market shortfalls by funding a number of most promising seed phase startups with small investments with very high risks, to continue more selectively with private co-funding in startup phase, and to leave this growth phase primarily to private financiers. We also try to even more intensify research or let's say guide the research so that it's really have a very strong evidence for our companies' economy, and that's why we established new strategic centers for science, technology and innovation. It was already mentioned by Petri Peltonen here. Innovation processes are changing, and we have started to fund open innovation and client and user participation in companies' innovation processes. And concerning the challenge of quicker utilization of research results, we are funding nowadays also piloting and demonstration projects, platforms and testing in platforms. And the last slide, the importance of or increasing importance of non-technical innovation means that we also fund a lot of non-technical development like business or service concept, branding, practices, management and organizing of work, design and so on. And we try to do this so that we can get strong impact in productivity increase, meaning that in the same company, the company is integrating technical and non-technical innovations and development. We have new tools and incentives for internationalization. It's very important. And we also try to charge our customers, companies, to be able to fund for development of cooperative value chain programs of company groups. These value chains can be global also, not only Finnish ones. And then we try to have some impacts in creating innovative markets. So we have a special funding concept for development of innovative public procurement and pre-competitive procurement. This was a snapshot of what we have been changing for the last years. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that very clear set of lessons from the Finnish experience. And now we're turning to Israel, I think.
Thank you. Just to add about myself from the morning, I want to say that I have experience working with government and also in the private market. So I know both sides, and it helps me to understand the processes that happen today and also in the past. And I want to show you now some slides, and on each slide I will try to say what we learn from it and what maybe you can learn. So Israel is a very small country. It's very strange to speak about small country in India, but that's what we are. And I'm not going to talk about what you can learn from it. Of course, there is a long discussion, good and bad. But one thing I can say, that because we are small, we don't have the problem of clusters. We are one cluster. So if you want to learn how to make a good cluster and successful cluster, you can look at Israel. This you already seen 3 times today, and you see that Israel invests for more than 4% out of the GDP in research and development. What you can learn is very simple. Invest more in R&D, because the results are very good. I want to say, I want to talk about the entrepreneurial culture, which is very important, and this is something which I don't think government can create or somebody can create it, but it's type of environment that is created and the community help it. So we talked in the morning, reward risk-taking is very important, including failures. You must be tolerant to failures. Otherwise, people will not take risk. Attitude of must win, go global approach. What you see here, you can find in Israeli entrepreneurs, and I believe that these are kind of characters that if you identify it in people here, then you can trust you have entrepreneurs, and if you don't, try to create an environment which will encourage all these qualities and maybe even more. The role of government, still there is some role for government in the entrepreneurial side. I would say that it's more an indirect role, and it happened in Israel through the government procurement, and especially from the defense institutions. And it's very interesting to see in Israel that young kids, before they go to the army choose the best of them and convince them to go and serve in special units who are doing research and development with new products and new developments. And they work there for 5-7 years, and then they go to the market. They can release and go to the market. And what you can see there is a very interesting phenomena. These people are working with, they are the best people. They are working with the best equipment. But what is more important, they are working with a customer. So, and after 5 or 7 years, they finish university, they work in research and development in the very advanced laboratories. And as I said, according to spec of a customer, you go out and become either entrepreneur or a key employee in a high-tech company. As you can see, 50% of the startups include such people. So what you can learn, very simple. If you choose the best people, let them work with the customer, and with the best equipment, you will have good companies afterwards. It's very important to see here some points about why government should go into business, especially venture business, or why they should not, and if they go into it, how should they go? So you can see I'm not going to go over all of it, but from everything here, you can see an example from what the Israeli government did in the past and doing now. So first of all, market failure condition justify government to take step and intervene. Government as a catalyst, I say a few words about it in the morning. In the 90s, there was no venture capital in Israel, and nobody wanted to do anything about it because it was too risky, And at that time, the government decided, through the Office of the Chief Scientist, to take a step and do it by itself. So the government decided to create a government company. It was $100 million budget. And this company mission was very simple, to create the venture capital market in Israel. We did it within 4 years. We created 10 funds, 10 small funds, together with experienced funds, other funds, foreign funds, and with local partners. We learned how to work, which is very interesting subject, of course, how you do public-private partnerships. And at the end, we finished with the venture capital industry, which in 10 years raised about $10 billion, raised to about 60 venture capital management companies, and many venture-backed companies raised money in Nasdaq Stock Exchange, and also went through merger and acquisition. So you see, the government here was a catalyst. The government did not decide to stay with this forever. Once they saw that the mission completed, they just stepped out of this market, and the market became very competitive without government involvement. It's very important that the government will understand, people in the government will understand that the business people and the government people are different. They have different goals. They have different ambitions. And what government people cannot do is manage business instead of the business people. Once you cross these borders, you can face disasters. Another important factor in Israel, which I want to say a word about it, is the Chief Scientist's Office. The Chief Scientist's Office controls more or less about the high-tech industry in Israel, because it has different type of activities, as you can see here, from pre-seed, generic R&D, and international cooperation. But what is important, why it is important? Because it's one entity that controls all these activities. What is enabled, it enables the people that sit there, especially the chief scientists, to think about the right policy, because they understand what's going on in the field. And they get the feedback from the companies. So most of the new policies on this area came from this office because of this type of activity, and I think if you want to learn from it, I think it's very important. Okay, I'm not going to speak about all the program. The international, just to see here that we have so many agreements with many countries, which helps many of our companies. And I just want to finish, just let you see what we think are the ingredients for success. Of course, it's very difficult to have them all, but I think it's very worthwhile to try and get it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Both our speakers have given us a lot of thought about the role of government as well. So now we have a speaker from the UK.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me to this roundtable. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to be here. In 6 minutes, I just want to try and say a few things about how you can draw lessons from innovation best practice. When I was asked if I would speak in this session, I thought, well, could I actually draw lessons from global best practice? Because listening to the discourse this morning and all the research that's done on innovation, one of the most powerful unifying concepts in the debate is the notion of innovation systems. And the great paradox for me is that the innovation systems literature grew out of a belief that actually countries are rather different. And that to actually understand a country or a sector, you had to understand the particularities of its system. And I think that raises really important issues for how you can draw lessons from the experience of other countries for your own. And I've written elsewhere about what I've called a cargo cult approach to innovation policy. Cargo cults were Melanesian island millenarian movements in the post-war period they observed on the islands during the Second World War and immediately afterwards a rather large growth in all kinds of real wealth and materials associated with the occupation of the US Army. When the Army left, that went. And a group of religious cults grew up in which the structures of the US occupation were replicated. So they built mafia, bamboo runways and conning towers. And where the English had been important, they had afternoon tea as part of the ceremonies. And of course, the cargo didn't come. So there are some real issues about when you look at another country, what you can deduce about its innovation policy that might work for you. So rather than go through what you might learn from the UK, I just want to make a few observations about what I think we've learned in the UK from observing other countries and what that perhaps has led to in the way we think about these things. So the first one, which I think is very important, is venture capital and entrepreneurship, which featured a lot this morning. And a reference has often been made to the experience of the United States in this case. Now, it's actually extremely difficult to draw easy lessons for the UK from the US. And when you look closely at the US, some very important elephants in the room, which aren't often discussed, loom very large. So risk-taking US venture capitalists do indeed invest relatively highly in early stage, but the whole of informal venture capital investment in the US in early stage is matched by US public sector defense support for early stage. So trying to develop an informal venture capital industry without the context of de-risking that goes with major public sector investments a real challenge. So there are important issues about taking venture capital. In the UK, I think that's led us to try and develop a similar kind of program to the SBIR in the United States, which is one of the key elements in public sector investments in early stage. But then a really big challenge in trying to do that is if you don't have defense or national health departments of the same scale to make the investments and develop the supply chain. So I'm sure that the discussions that have been aired this morning about the role of the public sector are very important, but the scope for making big changes there rely on advancing policy in more than one line of action. So to get a lot out of venture capital and entrepreneurship also means thinking very carefully about the role of the state as public venture capital and the use of public sector R&D to support things. The second observation I wanted to make was in relation to entrepreneurship and the role of large firms. Large firms have hardly been mentioned in the discussion I was present at this morning, and yet large firms dominate most of the inputs that were talked about this morning in terms of R&D. And so thinking through what kind of policies might be appropriate in particular sectors means thinking very carefully about what kind of strategies large organizations are following. And in terms of innovation from the bottom of the pyramid, a lot of that is thinking about what kind of business models large global enterprises are going to follow. And that's a very big issue for the UK because amongst global economies, we're one of the most open. We have the highest percentage of our R&D financed from abroad. We have a very high ratio of our domestic production in overseas affiliates, and the amount to which our UK-based multinationals are investing abroad has doubled in relation to their investment in the UK. So one of the key issues, I think, in UK policy and why we've moved policy towards thinking about engaging large and small firms in a sector and technology-based way is to think about the development of intermediary organizations which sit on the boundaries of universities and business and are capable of pulling together whole supply chains of interested parties. And Ian Gray from the Technology Strategy Board, I think later on today, will talk about the technology innovation centres as one of the moves of UK policy in that direction. So taking a holistic view of what a technology or a sector requires means thinking beyond the different elements of it in terms of small firms or large firms, but what the whole trajectory and the whole value chain might look like. And then finally, I just wanted to say something about the role of universities. It's a very striking, I think, piece of evidence that if you ask businesses what their main source of knowledge for innovation is, they don't cite universities. In all countries for which these surveys have been done, which ask this question, it's customers, suppliers, their own internal knowledge. Universities are a long way down this list. They're important in some sectors, and they may have particular importance in some technologies, but it's usually their use in combination with other sources of information, such as large firms, which really makes for the greatest traction. On the other hand, if you ask businesses what they think the most important output of universities is, they cite people. And if you look at the interactions between businesses and universities, there are many, many more times that they will cite interactions involving recruitment of highly skilled people, graduates, all kinds of problem solving and contracting, as opposed to spin-outs and licensing in relation to patents. So in relation to UK policy, I think this has led to an interesting innovation, which is the Higher Education Innovation Fund, which in the UK context works quite well. It's adding to universities' income flow a set of funding on a formula basis, which the university can use to develop a diversity of relationships between the whole of its activities and external organizations, and not simply focusing on patenting and on licensing. So there were the remarks I wanted to make, and I'll stop at that point. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And we're now getting some insights from Australia. Richard, your presentation?
Don Russell. I don't know.
No. This one?
That's me.
This one?
Looks good.
Thank you. Look, I'm Don Russell. I am the Secretary of the Department of Innovation, Industry, Science and Research. Maybe I should just say a few extra words. I've been in the job 5 months. That doesn't mean I'm not an expert. But my background has been very much with central agencies in Canberra. I came up through the Treasury and the central parts of government. For the last decade or so, I've actually worked in the private sector in asset management. And in between those two roles, I was Australia's ambassador in Washington. So I see myself as a fresh set of eyes in all of this. But I thought it was interesting this morning, listening to people. It's very interesting, all those strengths that you think you have, you suddenly realise are very commonplace around the world, and you also realise that a lot of the problems you thought you're wrestling with in isolation, everyone else is wrestling with those as well. So what I thought might be useful to do, talk briefly, was like a lot of other countries, we went through a major review in the last couple of years. The government has responded, it's put in a new set of policies. I thought that it might be interesting just to look at the consequences of that and try and form some views as to whether this process has moved us further or closer to global best practice. Well, one thing that did flow from the review process was there was a large increase in resources devoted to innovation, research and investment in universities, something like 43% increase over the 4 years. So, well, what have we learnt? What have we learnt? I think that what it's done, it has meant that we've had to focus more clearly on our strengths and our weaknesses. And again, from this morning, it was pretty clear that, like a lot of other countries, we are very good at actually doing research. We have good skills. And one of the other things that we have, I guess, as one of our strengths is a much clearer understanding that because large sums of public money are involved in underwriting innovation and research, that the process has to be transparent and it has to be measurable. It has to have these characteristics to maintain public support. In terms of the challenges, well, they're again very similar to other people's. They're a need to increase the level of collaboration, both domestically and internationally, between researchers and business. We've also got to have to strengthen the ability of businesses, companies, to take research and to commercialise that. And there are, major challenges on the landscape, to do with climate change, which we are all wrestling with. Well, measuring things. It's always difficult to measure things, but having said that, that's no reason for not trying. Well, in terms of the Australian metrics, we did divide it up into these three themes: research, capacity, business innovation, links and collaboration. We did get down to measuring the number of research groups performing at world-class levels. So this really made us focus on the meaning of excellence. We did focus on the numbers of students completing higher degrees. This is something also you can measure. But we also include very much foreign students. We feel that there's actually an opportunity here for countries like Australia to provide access to foreign students at higher degree levels. The US has always traditionally benefited enormously from the great capacity to educate a whole array of clever people from around the world. In recent years, they've turned their, for other reasons, they've made that a much more difficult endeavour for most foreign students. In terms of innovation, again, you can measure just the number of businesses who are engaged in R&D, also the number of businesses who are actually innovating. And in terms of links and collaboration, we've set ourselves the task of doubling the level of collaboration between Australian businesses, universities and publicly funded research organisations. And we've also set ourselves the task of increasing collaboration with international bodies. Well, we've only had 1 year really of data. This is the results. You can't say we've been gilding the lily. Most things have gone backwards. So we say it's early days, which indeed it is, but we've also had to wrestle with the fact that in the middle of all of this, we've had the global financial crisis. So this hasn't discouraged us from measuring targets and delivering on this, and it'll be a steady discipline on us as we go forwards. But the one weakness that I thought we should talk about was collaboration. The reason why we feel that collaboration has been an issue is because when you ask businesses who have been actively involved in innovation, almost 61% of them say that the source of their information was within the business or a related company, which was a factor that I think has already been mentioned. And when you run down the list again, you see that universities and government agencies are very small contributors to the sources of information that people use when innovating. Now, why is collaboration important? Well, it's because it appears to be a key part of the way in which firms are willing to adopt novel innovation, and it seems to spread risks, and it certainly leverages up resources. Well, collaboration between researchers and industry is a taxing and vexed question. It's again raised by a lot of people. I thought I might just talk about two examples in Australia which are interesting. The CSIRO is a body which is very similar to the Indian CSIR. In fact, the CSIRO predates the CSR. It's an 80-year-old body. Now, why is it interesting? Well, it is a large government-funded research organisation. We have 6,500 people involved in it, which is a great asset. But as with all government-funded research organisations, it is always a challenge to make sure that the focus and the attention that this organisation is devoting itself to are relevant and are actually delivering results. I mean, it's probably unfair, but probably 20 years ago, people did tend to view the CSIRO as something of a sheltered workshop for research scientists. But over the last 20 years, the organisation has quite deliberately set about giving itself direct focus on what its chief objective was, which was to facilitate the transfer of research into industry and to commercialise that. And one of the ways in which this has been done is to get the organisation to focus on identifying and supporting global precincts. Now, everyone talks about global precincts. There does appear to be well-documented evidence that if you bring clever people together, it's actually better than having them separate. But for organisations like the CSIRO, it's very important because it forces them to collaborate. If they become responsible for the development of a global precinct, they actually have to build the relationships with universities and national health organisation researchers. So it's had two focuses. It's helped build global precincts, but it's also forced the CSIRO itself to want to reach out and build relationships with these other organisations. And the other vehicle that we have, which sponsors and actively encourages that link between research and industry. The Cooperative Research Centres, this is a 20-year-old program. It's a program which puts Commonwealth money in with university money and with industry. So it means that industry has that capacity to be involved in the design stage of research. And we now have something like 42 CRCs, and they're actively, and in fact they're instructed to actually build relationships with small businesses. So there's something like 798 SMEs and 460 large companies which are actively involved with those 42 CRCs. And there are in fact 8 research collaborations with Indian institutions. So the governance structure is very important. I've just picked out this is a picture of trying to represent the entire governance structure of the Australian innovation system. If you look at the diagonal running across, these are the ways in which we actually deliver the services. That's part of my department, but we've got the delivery functions completely separate from the policy functions. The Innovation Australia Board is a distinguished group of Australian business and active involvers. It's important to get feedback. And up in the top left-hand corner, I have my dear friend Ian Chubb, who is the chief scientist. I've also realised from discussions and listening today, chief scientists around the world seem to have an important role in all of this. I've said to our chief scientist that we're going to give him a much increased role, a much greater function in terms of setting priorities. I've always said that if you want to get a better quality of chief scientist, you have to give them a decent job. So, and the PMSEC at the bottom is also interesting, I suspect partly because of this roundtable. That's the Prime Minister's Science, Engineering and Innovation Council, which is important in terms of giving high-level coordination and impetus to all of this. So, climate change is an important challenge to us all. What I've learned from this is that we're not the only country who sees first mover advantage in this area. We've got something like $10 billion in a clean energy corporation designed to facilitate the development of alternative energy. 10 billion Australian dollars is a sizable sum. The Australian dollar is now actually worth more than the US dollar. So that's real money, but I've also realised that we're not alone. There are many, many countries that are endeavouring to do the same thing. So first mover advantage and collaboration, I think that's a challenge. But let me just finish up then. Well, I think that there is no such thing as best practice, because you're never going to be the best at everything. But I think there is best practice is really about having the right process. And it's really being able to have structures in place which enable the innovation research side of public policy to win the argument as to why there should be public resources involved in this, and also to keep that support. And part of that, and a very important part of that, is to be able to demonstrate that there is a research dividend. So thank you.
Thank you. Can we press on rapidly?
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Sam Pitroda, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I'm delighted to be invited for such an important roundtable. The representative of the Ministry of Economic Affairs, Mrs. Marije Hulshoff, spoke about the significance of the creative industries in the Netherlands. She also presented the proposal by the Indian-Dutch team on design education, titled Indeed. It's my pleasure to tell you more about this, and this plan in particular, that aims at strengthening one of the core innovation capabilities, design education. Before doing so, I want to first like to introduce myself. Since 2005, I'm the Dean of the Faculty of Industrial Design Engineering of the Delft University of Technology. This faculty is the largest identified academic school for industrial design worldwide. It covers a broad set of disciplines ranging from business, technology, ergonomics and aesthetics. From the start of the faculty 42 years ago, these disciplines have become the pillars of design education, combined with the very important design exercises that aim at the integration of design knowledge in real products and services. Large and growing numbers of international students, including students from India, spend time in the Netherlands, for instance at the world-famous Design Academy in Eindhoven. The academic design faculties in Delft, Eindhoven and Twente operate in a joint school for doctoral education, Together we have a considerable number of PhD candidates, thereby pushing the knowledge boundaries ahead. Only 2 weeks ago, we hosted the 4th World Design Research Congress in the Netherlands. Together with reputable schools such as Loughborough University, Aalto University and Politecnico di Milano, the Delft University of Technology establishes the Design Research Alliance. In the Netherlands, there's a strong collaboration between design schools, both at the academic and at the vocational level. Even more so, this collaboration involves branch organizations of creative professionals. Many companies, varying from very small companies to large ones like Philips and Unilever, take part in establishing the right infrastructure for design to develop. From the early days in design education, the Dutch government was crucial in building the design competence by acting as a demanding design commissioner. Currently in the Netherlands we are running a substantial design research program for the creative industries called CRISP. This program is about product service systems and entails 61 organizations consisting of knowledge institutions, design agencies, companies in the economic domain and institutions like care providers in the public domain. So far about design in the Netherlands. When we were invited by Mr. Pitroda to develop a plan for design education in India, we were very excited to do so. In the kick-off meeting in July, in the residence of our ambassador, we actually met face-to-face with Mr. Pitroda and a number of leaders from the field of design in India. From the start, everybody around the table believed that together, Indian and Dutch experts, we can move things forward. Together we can substantially strengthen design education and thereby train young people in such a way that they are well equipped to address the major social and economic challenges in India. After the kick-off meeting, we started to build the Indian-Dutch team to develop a plan. This team not only consists of design educators and design researchers from various universities, it also includes design professionals from both countries. In different team compositions over the last few months, we visited design schools, professional organizations, incubators and companies in places like Delhi, Ahmedabad, Mumbai, Bangalore and Goa. We invited many design educators and design professionals from all over India to come to the Design Yatra. There we had a series of workshops to define the challenges in design education, and we also started to brainstorm about pathways to address them. The main challenges in design education that we identified are a lack of integration between design and technology, lack of approaches to confront globalization, lack of design research culture, large distance between traditional knowledge and crafts and contemporary needs, lack of awareness about the role of design in the public sector and in the private sector. In the plan, these and other challenges are described. Of course, the plan also proposes how to deal with these challenges. The team has integrated their insights in a series of projects on design education and design awareness. All projects are laid out on a timeline 2012-2020. The projects on design education address the short-term need to provide a benchmark of current design education. On a slightly longer term, we discuss incorporating the latest insights from around the world in design education, teaching the teachers and introducing a funding program for design research. For the longer term, completely new models of design education are suggested. We have greatly enjoyed the process that led to this proposal. More than before, we are aware that strengthening India's design competencies is a major project. It will not be easy. The design world is multifaceted, complex, creative and extremely dynamic. We therefore propose to take a pragmatic approach and to start a dialogue on which projects we should begin with or add to the program. We can't wait to begin. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for that very practical example of something that can be done to help develop the skills necessary. Now we're going to the US, I think.
Good afternoon. I want to thank Sam Pitroda and the Indian Innovation Council and also the World Bank for being here. I'm going to give a sort of a global perspective. I have 5 messages, and so 6 messages in the 6 minutes. First of all, the global context is much more demanding. Innovation is much more important, and within that, inclusive innovation. The innovation system is more global. The drivers of innovation differ across the different agents, and that's important when we design government policies. And government policy have to take it into account. And we also need more concerted action to deal with the potential benefits we can get from inclusive innovation. So on the new global context, it's very dynamic now, and we have implications from that. There's a greater focus on innovation. This morning we've heard from 10 countries, and they're all focusing on innovation as a matter of national strategy. The landscape has also changed very much, and in particular there's been a big power, economic power and geopolitical power coming to Asia, and India is certainly there, but also China. And China was invited. Unfortunately, China did not come, but I think it's quite important to follow up with China, as you will see. There's also the rapid growth of a middle class, and that provides market potential for the big agents, and I'll explain that in a moment. But at the same time, there's increasing inequality across countries and within countries, and therefore we need to really focus on inclusive growth and inclusive innovation. And at the same time, we have major new global challenges. One thing which is new under the sun, it's an absolute constraint because of the implications of climate change, limited CO2 absorption capability, new sources of energy. We have water and food shortages. We also have health issues, pandemics, and in the developed world, it's aging population and security. Now, innovation can play a very important role in all this. You all know that, and I'm going to just skip over it. What I want to say is not talking about frontier innovation, but something which is new to a country, a firm, a sector, or an organization. And it's really very important to also look at the unit, maybe the firm, the governments, social organizations, or even individuals. Now, I think it's important because of all of the increasing interdependence facilitated by reduction in transportation cost and communications cost, that we look at the system as a global system. And all the presentations this morning pointed out how there's more need for international collaboration. And what I would like to say here is that if you take a look, it's important to sort of see we focused a lot on national innovation systems, but more important than that now is this tremendous flow which goes across, both in terms of trade, capital goods, the activities of multinational companies. And the big elephant in the room that we haven't said that much about is the large companies. 2/3 of global R&D is done by the private sector. And the 1,000 biggest multinational companies do more than 50% of global R&D. The 20 biggest do 13% of global R&D. So they're the main engines turning knowledge into something applied and practical. And we have to find a way to get them involved in this whole process of indigenous innovation. Then there's the global research networks, the information and communications networks, the diaspora networks, and we see very good examples of how that is working here in India. We also have the flow of people, and also just coming to conferences like this. And very importantly also the global education networks. As students go abroad, right now there's about 3 million students studying outside their home country, and 16% are from mainland China. And that's one way they get access to basic knowledge. India is about 5% of the total. So some of the implications from this are the following. This is a diagram looking at the global innovation landscape in terms of the countries which are the big players. The size of the circle is proportional to the GDP, to the actual amount being spent by the different countries. The horizontal axis is the share of GDP spent on R&D. The vertical axis is science and engineers. And the key point here is that the US has been the biggest. It was about 40% of total R&D in the world in 1990. Now it's down to 33%. At the same time, China came out of nowhere to be the second largest spender. It's actually now surpassing Japan in spending on R&D. And the green countries are Asia. Asia is now spending a lot more than Europe put together. So we have a very different landscape in terms of the R&D going in. And when we look at who the main agents are, they have very different incentives. And when government is defining a policy for this, we have to take into account what the different incentives are so the policies can be done appropriately. Governments focus on R&D for military purposes, also for economic competition and improving welfare. The private sector is driven by profits, and at the same time there's some concern about corporate social responsibility, which is something that has been growing. Universities are looking for prestige regarding the creation of knowledge, and also to be able to attract funds and income from royalties and also consultancy. NGOs have more of a social purpose, and they also want to get some larger prestige and funding. Individuals want to improve their incomes and their welfare, and also to get prestige. So given that, that sets up the importance of devising the right mechanisms. Now, in inclusive innovation, what's happened because of this tremendous growth of some emerging countries, we have a much larger market. If you take a look at globally, there are about 2/3 of the global population is earning somewhat less than $100,000, $11 a day or $4,000 a year. And that's a very large new market that's emerging, very important for multinational companies, which are becoming more involved, and for domestic companies. And the needs of these people haven't been addressed that much by the innovation system because there wasn't enough market power there. But now there's an increasing. So we have a change in the landscape. This is becoming interesting for the corporations. But at the same time, lots of people are being left out of the market. And that's where government has a very big role, and also NGOs. Here I have something that you can't see from over there, but it's basically a framework for looking at the innovation landscape. I want to say that part of it is looking at new products, new processes, but a very important part is new business organizational models to get to the people who need it. And on the horizontal one, I have whether it's based on sort of recombining existing technologies, and sometimes they can be low-tech or high-tech, or whether it's developing new technologies. So we have a very rich landscape, and what I have here is all kinds of examples, a lot of them taken from India. And the players there can be research institutes, can be universities, it can be the private sector, it can be the grassroots innovators that we heard about this morning. They're developing new processes and also new products. So it's a very, very rich area, and a lot can be done to try to get that to be more involved. So the implications for government policy is we have to look at the sources, can be the firms, universities, research institutes, non-government organizations, including big multinational ones like the Gates Foundation, or domestic ones. And also not just domestic, but international. The incentives have to be tailored to the different actors. And the instruments are really very, very large. They go from fiscal and financial incentives that we discussed already, very different ways to do that. But it also, with respect to government, which is a very big player, not just in funding, but also in terms of implementation, is the directives to government research institutes and to the actual ministries to do procurement, focusing on the inclusive innovation, and also developing clusters. But we should also have to look at the broader enabling environment. Now, one of the main challenges for all of this, and I think that part of the reason why we're all here, is this need to go beyond what is being done by specific groups. We need to be able to, once you have an innovation, how to scale it up, how to get the thing produced, how to get it disseminated and used. At the same time, we need a better global network for sort of really championing and advocacy for what can be done with inclusive innovation. And I think that all of you around the table are important agents in facilitating this. Also to be able to lobby, to share the experience, to share information about new products and services that can be very appropriate for people who are less income, and also to develop a way to channel more funds that can be done through bilateral and multilateral programs. So I think we have a very rich agenda, and I expect that maybe towards the end of this, we'll be trying to get to some very concrete ways that we can move forward on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We've now got a representative from a private company involved in innovation to give us some insights. We're moving rapidly towards extra time now, and we have one more speaker to come afterwards. So thank you for your patience.
Okay, so I'm just going to speak that slide. Good afternoon. My name is Brian Graves, and I'm from a company called Imperial Innovations. And I'm speaking this afternoon as a practitioner in this whole area of technology transfer and venture capital. Imperial College is where we're based, and that's one of the top 10 research-intensive universities in the world. And so I'm speaking from a position of trying to commercialize technology from research-intensive universities. This is big science, trying to take big science to market. At the other end of the scale, Imperial Innovations was a founder shareholder in a business called Eye2India that is based in Bangalore. And it is attempting to follow the same basic business model to take technology not only from Indian universities but from elsewhere. But fundamentally, it's around new, innovative research from universities, taking it to market. And I'd like to tell you a little bit about our journey and our story and draw out some of the what I would consider to be important practice issues. and to tell you a little bit about I2 India. So the key part of what we do is that we integrate technology transfer, so that's taking inventions from the academics, and we understand that environment very closely, and we build businesses around them. And we also have our own venture funds that we can invest in them. So we're very integrated in that whole range. We have been in operation for about 25 years, and we built up a portfolio of companies, and then in 2005 we raised through a private placing of shares some investment from external investors. So we moved from being a wholly owned university technology transfer company to having private investors, and we invested in our own right from our own balance sheet. To date, we have now raised over £200 million, which we invest. The shareholders are not active in our business. We are autonomous. We are autonomous from the university, and we're autonomous from our shareholders. So we back our own judgment. We're backing our own mortgage. If we fail, then we're out of business. So we're very careful about how we invest our money. But we are working with an inventive community. So the other part of what we're doing is to encourage further invention and for people to participate. The issue of failure has come up several times this morning, and I think a really key point about best practice in that area is fail it early. Don't let these businesses drag on. Just make sure that there is a market need and that the technology is going to work and there's customers, and then you've got a chance. But you've got to couple that with great management. And that was the second point I wanted to come to. Again, we've been hearing emerging some questions about big business. The managers that we bring into our business are almost all uniformly from big business because they understand markets, they understand how to create businesses, and that the notion of an academic or a lone inventor having the skills, the vast array of skills that are needed, is just a fallacy. If you've got great technology, you need to bring in a world-class management team, and then you've got something that's backable. Now, we produce maybe 3 or 4 companies a year. We see over 300 inventions. So we're killing a lot of things very quickly, very early. But we have to do that in a constructive way to keep the engagement of the academic community. But what we offer is the ability to bring a management team, bring the investment resources, and go the journey. I've been with Imperial Innovations for 10 years. One of the first companies I formed was a stent business. And that company has now just entered clinical trials with its product on human trials in man. That's a 10-year journey to get through to clinical trial stage. It will probably enter the market in the next 5 years. That's a 15-year journey. And that needs to be sustained over a very long period of time. So from a government policy perspective, you've got to stick with it for a long time. From a technology commercialization point of view, you've got to have the resources and support to manage that over a long period of time. We also cater for a very wide range of businesses. We have a portfolio of about 90 businesses, some of which have exited. But within the group of active companies, we have about 20 that are what I describe as venture capital backable. So they have got the growth potential and size and scale that would be of interest to real venture capital companies. We have another 20 which we support, but don't necessarily put in a great deal of investment, but they still have significant growth potential. And then there's another group that we just monitor. But we're in many ways providing support and encouragement to the management teams around those companies. I think another very fundamental approach that we bring to all of this is that we are trying to bring technology to market. We're not trying to protect our investment like a venture capital fund. You know, if things start going wrong, then the first people that head to the hills are the venture capitalists. We want to see society benefit from the technology and science that's generated by universities. And I think bringing that key cultural experience is very important, and that having those processes and having those sorts of cultures is the sort of thing that is being put in place in Eye to India, and is something that we hope that will bring to the whole commercialization activity in India, as well as building on the experience we've had in the UK. So, in a rather rapid -6 minutes, that's all the ground that I wanted to cover.
Thank you very much indeed. And now, moving firmly into extra time, the session will not be complete without a few words from France, who are going to make a final contribution.
Up there, Fiona.